Maxwell and Margaret had been married for 7 years. Their eldest, a bright-eyed 5-year-old, was soon joined by a pair of spirited twin girls, now 2 years old. The news of a second pregnancy had caught them off guard, and discovering they were expecting twins, that was a whole other level of surprise. Margaret, still in her work clothes when the ultrasound revealed the double blessing, could hardly contain her giddy excitement. Though the idea of being cooped up at home every day wasn't exactly thrilling to her, Maxwell had taken her hands, looked into her eyes, and promised she wouldn't be alone in it. "If it gets too hard, we'll invite someone from our family," he said softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "We can handle this, Mila." And just like that, their little world expanded. Life with 3 kids was chaotic, sure, but beautiful in its own way. Time moved swiftly, as it always does with young children, and before long Margaret was preparing to return to work. Her friends, noticing how drained she looked, nudged her toward a proper break, a seaside escape to reset and breathe a little. The idea settled into her like a warm breeze. One evening, she brought it up to Maxwell, her eyes dreamy. "I think I need a real vacation," she sighed. Maxwell smiled knowingly. Lately, that phrase had been on repeat around the house. But lucky for her, he'd already been plotting a little surprise, a trip for 1, maybe 2 weeks by the sea. He knew how relentless the past couple of years had been on her, especially juggling the twins during maternity leave. He'd quietly taken on extra work, stashing away what he could. Then, over dinner a couple weeks later, he slid an envelope across the table. Scrawled across it in messy handwriting were the words, "Beloved, to the sea." Margaret gasped, then squealed, wrapping her arms tightly around him, laughter and gratitude bubbling out of her all at once. Her little daydreams had finally bloomed into reality. "She's got me all figured out after all these years," Maxwell chuckled. Margaret gave a playful shrug, not bothering to deny it. But there was something else, lingering in the corners of her mind. Should she tell her lover that the trip had been on the calendar for a while now? That the itinerary had long since been mapped out with her friends? Instead, with a sheepish little grin, she murmured, "There's something I feel a little guilty about." Maxwell had never doubted her. Her friends were practically family tight-knit since their high school days. He trusted them, and he trusted her. So, with a calm heart and the quiet strength of a man who'd weathered storms and sunny days alike, he watched his wife set off on her much-needed escape, staying behind with their 3 little ones. Margaret, meanwhile, embraced the vacation like someone coming up for air after a long dive. It was a slice of freedom, a space to just be again, beyond the endless rhythms of motherhood. The first few days slipped by effortlessly, but by day 4, after 1 too many cocktails, she found herself needing space from the noise, the chatter, even her friends. So she wandered off toward the spa, eager for solitude and softness. She treated herself to a handful of indulgent treatments, letting herself melt into the calm. The final item on her spa menu was a massage. When she stepped into the dimly lit room, infused with the scent of lavender and warm oils, something in her chest fluttered unexpectedly. Standing before her was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, easily towering over her by a head and then some. His shirt clung just enough to reveal a sculpted frame beneath, and when he smiled, it was both disarming and magnetic. Margaret felt a sudden heat rise beneath her skin, but the masser remained completely professional, starting the session without a word about it. Still, for the rest of the day, her mind kept drifting, back to those strong, practiced hands, the gentle pressure, the scent of his cologne. In her thoughts, he was no longer just a man in the massage room, he was the one whose arms she imagined herself slipping into. That night at the club, Margaret didn't recognize him at first. The music was loud, the lights dim, and her head was still foggy from the wine. Someone came up behind her on the dance floor and gently placed their hands on her waist. Reflexively, she pulled away and spun around, ready to confront the bold stranger. But then she froze. It was him, the masser. A wave of embarrassment washed over her. He smiled, a little uncertainly now, and introduced himself in broken English. "Adam," he said, and the name sounded awkward in his speech in a foreign language. By morning, Margaret found herself waking up in an unfamiliar bed. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting patterns on the sheets. Adam was beside her, still asleep, his expression peaceful and unaware. She stared at him in stunned silence. Her stomach twisted not from the hangover, but from guilt that settled like a stone in her chest. Guilt for Maxwell, For her children, for her friends, for herself. Without waking Adam, she gathered her things and fled barefoot, her heels in hand, clothes from the night before still wrinkled. The early morning sea air bit at her skin, clearing her head as she rushed back to the hotel. Nothing terrible happened, she tried to reassure herself. Just a brief spark, a reckless escape, a secret indulgence in a world separate from her own, a memory that would stay locked away, never to cross the threshold of her real life. Later, Margaret introduced Adam to her friends, laughing, playing the part, her guilt hidden beneath layers of charm. Her friends didn't ask questions. None of them were married, after all. They'd seen flings before, or so she told herself. What she didn't notice was that Marina had gone quiet. Marina has always liked Maxwell. She even respected him. At the sight of his warm smile and the kindness in his eyes, something in her trembled. Watching Margaret throw it all away, her stomach clenched. Unable to hold back any longer, she began documenting everything, random snapshots, low-key photographs capturing moments that Margaret had no idea were being watched. Her plan was simple. As soon as they returned home, she would send them anonymously. Let Maxwell find the truth for herself. Meanwhile, Margaret remained wrapped up in her secret romance, oblivious to the shifting glances around her. When the vacation finally drew to a close, saying goodbye to Adam left a strange ache in her chest. But she was firm, no exchanging numbers, no messy aftermath. She wanted to keep it as a beautiful mistake, untainted by reality. Adam gave her a bracelet oddly shaped, handcrafted from a local market. She accepted it with a soft smile and promised she'd treasure it. And then it was over. Back home, the rhythm of life resumed. The children ran into her arms, squealing with delight, their little hands clinging to her as if she'd been gone forever. Maxwell greeted her with a tenderness she hadn't expected. He couldn't stop looking at her, the golden glow of her skin, the lightness in her step, the softness in her eyes. It was like she'd returned to him new. He missed her more than he thought he would. Margaret settled back into her routines. The bracelet stayed tucked away in a drawer, the memories carefully boxed inside her mind. Weeks passed. Life found its steady rhythm again. "Someone dropped this off for you," the colleague said with a shrug. "Said it had to be given to you personally." Max turned the envelope over in his hands. No name, no return address. Just his own written neatly on the front. "Delivered by a boy," the colleague added, "a courier, probably, though young enough to raise questions." Puzzled, Max tossed it into the passenger seat of his car. The day swept him up, and he didn't think about it again until much later, when the sun was dipping low, and he was finally on his way home. When Max finally opened the envelope, a strange chill ran down his spine. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out a thick stack of photographs, around 30 in total. Each one captured Margaret in candid, damning intimacy with a stranger. They embraced, they kissed, each image a blow sharper than the last. His jaw tightened until it ached. That vacation, the one he had meticulously planned, saved for, sacrificed time and energy to give her, had become the stage for his betrayal. The very fruits of his labor had paid for her affair. A guttural sound tore from his throat as he slammed his fist against the steering wheel, setting off the car's horn with a helpless wail. He didn't care. Not about the noise. Not about the street. Not about anything. He drove home in a haze of fury, thoughts swirling like a storm behind his eyes. His son was still at his mother's, and the little one was already asleep in her room. The house was quiet, peaceful, even. But that peace shattered the moment he stepped through the door. Margaret was on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. The sound, light, careless, cut through him like a blade. He didn't bother taking off his shoes. He walked in, eyes locked on hers, and without a word, threw the stack of photos onto her lap. Her laughter died instantly. One glance was enough. Her face drained of color as she flipped through the images, horror dawning in her widened eyes. Then she looked up at Max. His chest rose and fell rapidly. The veins in his forehead stood out, his hands trembling not from weakness but from a barely restrained urge to destroy everything in sight. She didn't speak, didn't deny, didn't cry. Perhaps she knew better. Max unleashed a storm of words, furious, blistering, words she had never heard from him before, words that made her flinch. She didn't fight back. She simply listened, shame coiling around her like a noose. Still, he couldn't leave. Not that night. Not right away. For a month, he disappeared, finding refuge on a friend's couch, numbing the ache with alcohol. He drank not just out of anger, but out of grief. Grief for what had been lost. grief for the children, grief for the version of himself that still believed love could be simple. Eventually, hollowed out and haggard, Max returned. He told himself he would try. And he did. For 5 years, he tried to stitch the marriage back together with the flimsiest of threads. He told himself forgiveness was a choice. That time could dull betrayal into something bearable. That maybe, if he focused on the kids, the house, the day-to-day, he could forget. But he never truly could. And one morning, with the quiet finality of someone long past his breaking point, Max told her he was leaving. There were no tears, no shouting, no last-minute pleas. Margaret just nodded. She had known, deep down, that this day would come. Left alone with the children, she had to adapt quickly. Money grew tight. She scrimped where she could, working out hours to keep the lights on and food on the table. Romantic prospects evaporated. Few men were willing to shoulder the reality of a woman with 3 children and a visible burden of regret. So she lived quietly, lonely. Nights grew colder. Mornings were empty. She came to know the shape of solitude too well, its silence, its stillness, its cruel consistency. Her bed stayed cold. Her heart even colder.